And then you've got to scan a QR code, and then you've got to type that code in, and then you've got to type the next code in. And it's a really terrible user experience. It's secure more than an SMS, but when you start putting hoops in front of people and it makes it difficult to register, it's the old abandoned shopping cart scenario. Like, okay, forget this. This is taking too long. I'm going to either not do MFA or I'm going to default to a less secure model.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, you're right.
I know. I'm going to isolate that, and that's going to become, a soundbite for the show.
You're going to have a short out there where it's just like, you say something, and I'm just like, you're right.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you? Happy Monday morning.
Hey, how are you? It is Monday morning.
Yeah, I know, and I'm on my second cup, so I'm starting to get my act together a little bit. But, I spent the weekend kind of working on an assessment project for one of our clients, like assessing the maturity of the IAM program. And I kind of thought back, like, where is the value? What is the value in what I'm doing? Where's the client going to benefit from this information? Looking at things and saying, all right, this is a maturity on like a maturity scale of like 0 to 5 is kind of the common consulting maturity, CMMI, if you will. Where do you see the value in doing an exercise like that?
Well, I think it's helpful to take a step back at certain points and say, okay, how are things going? What are we doing? What are we missing? We get buried a lot in operations mode and just kind of day to day. And so I think there's value periodically. Maybe it's once a year, maybe it's every other year, maybe it's more frequent. Kind of depends on the maturity, I guess, where you're at and how quickly the environment is changing. But take a step back and say, hey, how are things going? This is kind of like a recap episode of your favorite show, right? Okay, what did we miss? Are we on the same page? And then let's set the new frame to go forward.
Yeah. And I feel like I've been doing these for 12, 13 years of doing identity consulting, and I think everybody wants to start off with this assessment, but I start questioning myself sometimes, like, okay, why is what I'm doing important? What is the value that's going to come out of this? And I came up with really 3 things that the exercise really helps with. And the first one is just kind of the point in time to say, this is where we were on such and such a date. We had somebody come in, do a maturity assessment around like, how well do we govern our program? How are we doing with identity lifecycle? How are we doing with authentication? So that you can then snap that line again 3 years, 5 years down the road to see how much progress you've made. The one thing I will say to keep in mind is that, you snap that line today, 3-5 years down the road, the line in terms of what is a level 2 maturity is going to change. So looking back at some decks from, a decade ago and looking at some of the assessment around authentication, there's a lot of stuff around, you really need to use multi-factor authentication. Use MFA
that's
everywhere.
A bold strategy. You should
bold strategy. Exactly. Well, at the time it was like, people were like, do we really need that? And I think, there's no mention of passwordless, no mention of passkeys, things like that.
Or quantum or AI or any of the buzzwords that we're seeing now.
Yeah, no distributed identity, nothing. So what I'm saying is that the line, what it takes to be like at any given level of maturity, that line moves over time. Just having MFA everywhere is no longer like, oh yeah, you got all of your ducks in a row. I'm not knocking MFA or saying you shouldn't have MFA everywhere. What I'm saying is like it's not what it was 10 years ago.
Well, even the methodologies have changed, right? It's like SMS used to be the gold standard. Now it's the least standard, I guess.
People make fun of it almost.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to exploit, but again, we're dealing with a curve of progress as things go up, things become more more or less secure depending on what's going on in the world. Turns out SMS is totally unencrypted, and there's plenty of backdoors. And I don't know if you've ever read about SMS behind the scenes. It's like basically like an unencrypted channel that everybody has access to if you're like a telco operator.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why they tell you now if you're doing cross-platform texting that you should just assume it can be read. You know?
Exactly.
So, okay. So the second thing that I came up with is that it gives you an idea of prioritization. So if you say, this is your current maturity, this is your target maturity, and you look across the landscape of all your different areas of IAM capabilities, you can start to highlight like, oh, we need to be at level 4 maturity. That's where we're going to have our program where it's like humming along. And right now we're at a level 1 maturity. So that becomes maybe, it just helps highlight the area of focus if it wasn't clear to you already, or maybe it starts to just, kind of support what you already suspected. So that's the second thing is prioritization. And then I think the third thing is going through the exercise, documenting how things are in the current state, just provides justification for why you need to make investments. So it's kind of the detail behind the assessment. So it's the exercise spits out all these things. I think the way you kind of, the way I've always approached getting to an assessment is by doing workshops, meeting with people who are the stakeholders, people who are doing the IAM program on a day in and day out basis, plus the people who, manage or oversee information security, human resources, all the areas that plug into the identity program, and getting their opinions. Pulling all that together really kind of shows you where you rank today in terms of, when you match up, here's how we do IAM, here's what we expect out of IAM. You can kind of start to put together where you rank from a maturity perspective.
Yeah, you get all those inputs from different areas, and it's a good opportunity also to celebrate wins and victories too. It's like, hey, look how far we've come based on where we were,
That's right.
a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever it may be.
Or even if you're regressing, right? If your program really hasn't moved at all in 3 years, you can show that, hey, the industry continues to move. The hackers, the bad guys continue to move. Things like zero trust, even though maybe they existed, not many people were doing it before. Now everybody's doing it. There's a reason behind that. We're falling behind just by not doing anything, just by not investing.
Yeah. That might be a tough discussion to have if you're in charge of an IAM program and to report back and say, well, we're not better, nothing's moving. Why are we doing this? So you've got to be careful on that messaging.
I've seen a lot of times where you're dealing with maybe a new IAM program manager and they've inherited this beast and they actually want lower scores because they want to reflect the reality that, this has been underinvested. Underinvested isn't going to work here any longer. Now we need a strategy to go from underinvested, very immature to a future state that's a lot different. I get your point though. I mean, who wants to get a report card of all C's and D's and maybe some F's if you're the one responsible for pulling it together?
Yeah. So hopefully it's going better, but there is value obviously in sharing that message because I think a lot of people run into organizational change being very difficult to actually move forward with things. And,
right.
I think you and I both find as we, talk with, our clients and stuff like that is most people know what they want to do, what they should be doing, but they're encountering roadblocks above or to the sides of them that is preventing progress. Could be budget, could be resourcing, could be timing, whatever it may be. I think sometimes the value of an assessment is it gives you a little bit of a CYA to say, okay, we told you where we're at. Now something happens and it has to do with this thing that we've assessed. You can't just say you didn't know about it. Every organization is making a conscious decision on the risk they're going to accept. And sometimes that acceptance of risk to their security is by not doing anything. They're not funding it. They're not resourcing it. They're not treating it as a priority. So, hey, the IAM program told the right people and the decision was still made not to do anything about it. Okay, that's a risk decision.
I've always thought exactly the way you just laid out there. It is a little bit of CYA, but it's not just CYA. It's you're doing your job because you don't get to make the decision of we're going to spend $1 million or we're not going to spend $1 million. I think you make the case, you show that here are the risks. Doing something about these risks in terms of mitigating them has a cost associated. Either make the investment or you don't make the investment. You live with the risk and accept it, or you spend the money, but you don't get to do both. You don't get to not spend the money and have the risk go away.
Now that would be magic if that were to take place. So
or a lot of people working weekends, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am as a 24/7 job. It'd be nice if the threats and the risks would schedule themselves like any other calendar appointment, but
well, they do seem to schedule themselves. They happen on Friday night. And they happen before long holiday weekends.
Yeah, because they know people are going to be out of the office, and sure, it's a smart time to make an attack or whatever it may be. So take advantage of that.
Exactly.
All right. Speaking of CYA, I'm going to give you a couple seconds here while I read off our discount codes for the upcoming conferences. You can take a sip of your coffee. So this is the last week that you're going to be in the U.S. You're heading off to Berlin for the Cooper conference coming up. So for those who are so inclined, May 6th to the 9th, Jim and I will both be at the European Identity and Cloud Conference put on by Cooper Cole. If you use the code IDAC25MKO, better use that code quickly because the conference is only a couple weeks away at this point. So you want to use that, get 25% off, and hope to see a lot of friendly faces there. I think we both got some Identibeer plans while we're in the area. And Jim, ahead of time, you're going to Norway, so I think you're going to do one there. I think there's a river cruise that we're both signed up for while we're there. So a lot of fun activities, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of friendly faces. So we got that. And then just a few weeks later, we've got Identiverse in Las Vegas. So that's June 3rd to the 6th. And if you use the code IDV25-IDAC25, that'll get you 25% off. We'll have both of those codes in our show notes as well as on the homepage at idacpodcast.com so people can check that out. Jim, you and I are getting very close to getting Identiverse kind of finalized. I'm going to go ahead and just put it out there. We are going to kick off the Expo Hall opening night, I think Tuesday night, whatever that is. Sort of first on deck in the Expo Hall, we're going to be reprising the Family Feud style game show that we did at Authenticate last year. I think right now we still have a working title of Identimatch for legal purposes and for trademark purposes. So we're working on putting that together, but we got about a half hour that we'll do another kind of game show. You're going to be a team captain. I'm not sure who the other team captain is going to be yet, but hopefully you're working with that person and also figuring out who your teammates are going to be as part of that. And then we'll have judges and things like that to kind of help us out. But looking forward to bringing that to Identiverse for the first time.
I'll be team captain. You'll be Steve Harvey, right?
I will be Steve Harvey stand-in, shorter, less mustached version of Steve Harvey.
You're going to tone it down a little bit in terms of the clothing, right?
Yeah, I don't have any like long yellow sport coat, suit jacket type things. So you'll probably see me in my blue sport coat with a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, we were joking around the other day. I think it was Steve Harvey that messed up during the Miss Universe pageant and said the wrong person won. I mean, that's like the ultimate, like, you hate for it to happen that somebody gets defined by one mistake that they made, but I don't know. Steve Charlie outlived that. Maybe it's just stuck in my head.
Well, he's got so much other stuff that he does. That's just a blip, all the things he's done. So
yeah,
if I'm Steve, I'm not too worried about that. It's like, whatever, it happens.
Yeah, right.
So that's going to be exciting. We got some podcast episodes, and I think there's a bunch of stuff going on in the ID Pro Slack channel. So definitely want to check out idpro.org and coordinate with those folks. I think some people are going to the John Wick experience at Area 15 earlier in the week. I'm actually going to go later in the week with my brother and check that out. But lots of stuff going on. So hopefully we see lots of friendly faces out there.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to be pretty busy there. You and I are both facilitating panels. We're doing that Identisquabble.
I like that name too.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember just doing like a synonym for feud, and squabble and match both came up. So Yeah, so we'll be doing those two things, and then we're going to record a few podcasts, and I think we're going to try to do like just man on the street and capture some video to have some things to throw on our YouTube channel. But overall, I mean, we're going to be a couple of working dudes.
Typical conference for us, man.
Yeah. Well, I hope people will stop by and just, say hi, maybe do like men on the street. We're not going to make it into anything commercial. So if you kind of like push your company's, business, that's probably not kosher for the channel. So we'll leave it at that for now.
That's what sponsor spotlights are for. So donate early, donate often. That's how we get off to these conferences.
That's right.
And we will have a spot on the show floor somewhere. I believe will be sort of like on the entrance off to the side of where the expo hall is. Not quite exactly sure yet, but the CRA team has been a lot of fun to work with, and especially Shirley. She's kind of been
shout out to Shirley.
Yep. So, okay. So that is all the meandering and babble up front. Why don't we get to our main thing today, which is Mailbag. So we've been getting a lot more emails, LinkedIn messages, carrier pigeons, SMS texts with questions and things like that. So we've got a handful for today, and this one is going to be 100% listener base from all around the world, including our lighter note at the end. So people want to stick around for that. So I think, Jim, the way that we'll handle this is I'll read the question, you tell me your thoughts on it, and then I'll chime in if I have anything to add, and we'll just kind of go through that. Does that work?
Sure. And by the way, I did cheat and I looked at the questions.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Like, we want to be able to.
So I had like 15 minutes of mental preparation.
Okay. So let's start with Robbie from India. Are passwords ever really going away, or are we just stuck with them forever? Kind of I feel like this is a very Jim question. Like, this is a very downer. Let's open things up with a downer. Let's see if we can rescue Robbie from the doldrums. Are passwords ever really going to go away?
So I think at some point, you stop typing into a keyboard. So, speaking of password, how's that any different than doing like a Face ID or thumbprint? But one thing I found to be true in IT is that things that are old keep coming back. Things that were done in the mainframe era, like come back and everybody thinks it's new. So I can see some people in a boardroom 30 years from now, maybe on a Zoom call, saying, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we just come up with something that it's like a secret that somebody has in their head, and then to get into our app or whatever they're calling it in those days, you just give this thing, we'll call it a password. So I can see it coming back, so maybe we'll never get rid of them. But I think the instantiation of passwords that we see today, they're only going to go away because interfaces change, because it just becomes easier to build an application, build a system, and to use some other form of authentication other than a password. I don't think teams are going to build systems that don't use passwords because they understand the security benefits of not using passwords.
Yeah, I don't think passwords ever really go away. I think they get obfuscated and hidden behind the scenes, and it will be some sort of password or password-like mechanism, whether it's certificates or other types of keys that might be behind the scenes. So I think the interaction with them will definitely change, but I don't know if it actually goes away. And like you said, I mean, legacy systems are going to be out there. They use passwords, and retrofitting a mainframe is maybe not feasible, and maybe doesn't make sense. So I hate to say it, they're probably around for a while, but I think the usability of them will definitely increase, especially as we come together on standards and things like that. And it might not look and feel like a password, which is okay as long as it's secure. And there is a process, that goes along with it to make sure that it is secure and usable and all that good stuff.
Do you think that the password situation today is that they're more usable or less usable than they were 10 years ago?
Define usable, because we've gotten more complex from a password strength meter.
Yeah, no, we've gotten more complex. I don't think I can be more specific with the question, because it gets into the answer, which is that we've got more complex, but we have to change them less frequently. But the thing is, it's like everywhere you go, the password standard is different. So if you think about like all the different websites you use, some of them do make you change it every so often. You can't reuse passwords. You can't use two letters that are the same in a row. Like, where did people come up with these stupid rules?
Yeah, all these pattern stuff. Or my favorite, my least favorite right now actually is your password must be between 8 and 20 characters. No more, no less. And you're in this little box. So if you want to have a long password, which is, secure, or use passphrases, right, and things like that, 20 characters is really limiting to be able to do that. So you're artificially impacting the security of your system, and that might be a system limitation. This field can't have more than that because of whatever. But it's gotten out of hand, I think.
So I'm not going to throw any of our fellow IAM practitioners on the bus, but I use a retirement site where they don't allow special characters. So you can't use a dash, you can't use an exclamation point or a hashtag or any of those things that I think make the password more complex. And they have a minimum strength of 8 characters. So it's like, come on. And this is a site where you go to manage your retirement funds, money. Yeah. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, if you're going
a lazy
to
way to address an injection attack. that's the way I look at it. Like, okay, if you have a problem with an injection attack, okay, I get it, right? There's certain characters that need to be obfuscated, moved away, restricted, whatever it may be. But to say you cannot use any special characters in a password, again, it's not security. It's security theater.
And then the MFA is SMS. So you put those two things together, and it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. I don't know if we answered Robbie's question, but I think you and I agree that the password situation needs to get better. But the silver lining for me, again, is I think the interaction with it changes and becomes more behind the scenes and plumbing versus, the first thing you see when you visit a website or an app, log in into your ID and password.
Yeah, and for the practitioners out there, what are the takeaways? It's, all right, move towards passkeys. It's use stronger authenticators than SMS. At least make those things an option. If your users want to default to SMS, and maybe the problem is that 95% would, but you should at least give people the option to use stronger security mechanisms. Yeah. And get away from using passwords on your app, especially if what you're protecting is like highly secret.
Yeah. I would like to see a better way to do push notifications and authenticator type apps and kind of things like that. It's a very clunky experience. If you're not a, IAM person, you have to kind of explain, you've got to download the Google Authenticator or the Microsoft Authenticator or the 800 other authenticator apps out there. And then you've got to scan a QR code, and then you've got to type that code in, and then you've got to type the next code in. And it's a really terrible user experience. It's secure more than an SMS, but when you start putting hoops in front of people and it makes it difficult to register, it's the old abandoned shopping cart scenario. Like, okay, forget this. This is taking too long. I'm going to either not do MFA or I'm going to default to a less secure model.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, you're right.
I know. I'm going to isolate that, and that's going to become, a soundbite for the show.
You're going to have a short out there where it's just like, you say something, and I'm just like, you're right.
Yep. Okay, let's go to Sarah from the United Kingdom. What's one thing in IAM you wish more companies would prioritize, but often don't?
It's interesting. So this is one of the ideas that I actually thought of bringing up as my opening tirade or my opening rant, if you will. So let me ask you a question. User experience. If you go into an organization, they're very doing things very manually. Maybe they're very decentralized. They've got a lot of onboarding forms that end users use. They fill out the form to onboard somebody, they send it in, and then magically the person shows up and all the access is there. There's a bunch of people behind the scenes making it all happen. But from an end user experience, the end user experience is quite good, right? They fill out the form, they email it away, and then somebody takes care of the problem.
I don't know if it's good. I think it's average. And here's why. Why am I filling out a form in the first place? You know the person's coming. You know you're going to pay them, hopefully. So they should be in some system somewhere. Why am I still having to fill out a form in the first place? We've defaulted to, the default onboarding user experience is a manager or an HR person or somebody, an admin goes in and says, oh, Jim is starting today, onboard him. Like, why is IM the last person to know about that?
Well, let's say we're in a very automated version and we say, all right, Jeff is the manager. He hires somebody and, all right, the person comes from the HR system. We give them the birth rate roles. They, I'm sure you had to request a laptop for them and maybe a phone and phone number, et cetera. Anyway, all that goes through. Now, what about the more advanced? So, you hire somebody to do podcast video editing. So they're going to need X, Y, and Z. That's different than the average user. There's no role defined for this job. So where does the onus go? Does it go on you that you have to go out to the ITSM or go out to an IAM system to request all this access? Or does somebody supposed to contact you? Or does the person just show up and they can't do the job until... So to me, it's those are not a good user experience. Having one form to go to say, all right, this new person starting and they need a laptop and they're going to need all the software. Maybe I just type it into the notes. I'm not saying it's the most efficient way or the right way, but from a user experience perspective, it's like, oh, I just had to fill out one form and they showed up and pretty much they were right off and working.
Well, I think so it sounds to me like you want to prioritize the user experience, which, I can find no fault in that.
No. Actually, so here's my counterintuitive is, maybe we have to deprioritize the user experience.
Why would you deprioritize the user experience?
Well,
walk me through that Jim logic.
Yeah, right. So I tied the user experience to in that situation where it's just one word form that you email around. So deprioritize it from the standpoint of we're not going to do that anymore, but prioritize it from the perspective that you have to mimic at least as good of a user experience as what existed with the manual form.
I mean, if you're trying to replicate manual processes with your automation tools, I think you're thinking about this in the wrong way. The whole point is to be more data driven. Someone's coming onboarded, and they're in the Workday system or whatever your HR platform is. Take that data and do stuff with it. You spent money on automation, so automate. What's the problem here? Stop making busy work for people, managers, HR people. Stop making them fill out forms. Now, I know I'm being probably a little bit pie in the sky, altruistic, whatever it may be, but if you have the technology to automate and you've got the data and you think the data is in a good enough spot where you can automate. Don't do it half-ass.
Yeah. No, I think maybe I was trying to be a little overly creative with the answer here, but you can't take a step back in terms of the user experience. And part of that user experience is psychological. In other words, okay, you're the manager and you want to know that when your new hire shows up, that he or she is going to have everything they need. They're going to have their laptop, they're going to have all their tech, but they're also going to have all the access that they need. You should at least kind of go through and be able to see in kind of a dashboard setting, here's all the things they need that they're going to get from an automation perspective. And here's all the things that maybe do need to be requested. Maybe after you go through that list, you're like, Adobe Premiere's not on that list. I got to make sure that they get Adobe Premiere.
But do they need that day one? I'd argue maybe not. How many people hire and are doing their full job within seconds of onboarding? Usually the first couple days is, going through onboarding training or company training or things like that. And maybe I'm making an argument for prioritizing zero standing privilege or just-in-time privileges. Yeah, we're talking about giving access to a whole bunch of things that they may or may not even use right away. So why not be more dynamic with that decision and say, make it more self-service? I mean, we all know how to use Amazon and buy stuff. Nobody taught us how to do it, but if I want to go in and, get a new camera, I can click a couple buttons and it'll be delivered to me pretty quickly, within a couple days for the most part. Why not take that same model and make it more self-service for those people? Say, oh, I'm going to be doing some video editing. Okay, which video editor do you want to use? Adobe, DaVinci, Final Cut, XYZ, whatever it may be. Select the one you want, click the button, and boom, it provisions it. You have the tools from an automation standpoint.
I think you're the one being overly creative now.
Okay, so what's the answer? Like, what is the one thing you wish companies would prioritize but often don't? Because you went down the user experience role, and then I'm not sure if you argued for or against the prioritization.
I think I may tried to be creative by arguing against it, but I think in the end of the day, I argued for it, which was, you have to kind of think about it from multiple aspects and make sure that you're not taking a step back with automation. Because I think our minds are wired toward, let's take things that are manual, automate them. That's not always a better user experience if it's not well thought through.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we stop automating. We say, oh, that's good enough, forget it. And then you start leaving, systems on the table from like an integration standpoint to further that automation. And automation can mean a bunch of different things. It doesn't have to mean like fully on board, fully off board, and everything is, in sync, right, in this magical world. There's the reality of things come in, and I think you can kind of define what a win looks like. I would argue something else for prioritization. I think that's actually running your IAM as a program strategically instead of quarter by quarter, month by month, fiscal year by fiscal year, and not really having a strategy or a plan of where you're going. So I would like to see more companies think about identity from more strategic terms, especially at a program level. What are you trying to do? What are your objectives, from a program perspective versus, oh, shoot, we got to get this thing in because it's next quarter, or it's this app is going live and we're band-aiding everything over the time. And I think that tends to lead to overly complex IAM environments, and the governance isn't there from policies or standards or even procedure. And so I'd like to see more of the people and the process side of IAM have more focus rather than just, hey, we slapped a technology on it and that'll fix everything.
Yeah, I also think when people are putting together their IAM strategy, some people are wired to think that a strategy is a list of products. And an IAM strategy is not a list of products. It's that does play a role, but it's people, process, and technology. And I know this sounds cliche, but it's as true as ever with IAM.
Yeah, that's a good soundbite. We'll just leave it there. Cut that one out now as well. All right, let's go to our friend Carlos from the USA. How do you see AI really impacting identity governance in the next few years? What is hype versus reality? Welcome to this portion of AI at the Center.
I really think that where AI is going to make the difference is for the ability for people to kind of not have to know how to do things, but just to go into some kind of interface and say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, for AI to figure out what they need and then get them to the right place, perhaps interpret the queries that they're making and turn them into action. I think identity is hopefully something that people don't have to do every day. So they forget, if a couple weeks pass between visits to IAM systems, where to go to do things. And I think AI could be a huge help in that. So it is from a user experience perspective. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that you're going to see AI show up, because I think a lot of the back end things that you could have AI do, I think people are afraid to touch right now. They're afraid to turn over to AI. One thing I've always been concerned about is like, does AI know the boundaries of what data it can include in terms of returning a response to a query? And I feel like a lot of developers or product companies, they are afraid of that. So I think where you're going to see AI show up the earliest is from an end user perspective on kind of more or less the basics of finding things, being able to query, but limiting that pretty significantly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we've talked to several companies already that have integrated AI and generative AI specifically for like natural language queries, right? Or things like that. And I think you end up in a spot where I think it will impact the user experience first, because I think that's the safest place theoretically to impact, because I don't know if we're yet to the spot where we would trust an AI to configure itself to be secure without somebody looking at the code, the workflow, the configuration, or whatever it might look like to actually make sure that it makes sense and it's doing the right things. So I do think of things where it is more accessible, right? I've forgotten most of the SQL that I would have used, 20 years ago to query a database looking for data in my IGA platform. At this point, I should be able to go into a system and say, show me all the users that have access to this application, or show me all the users that do not have MFA enabled, or show me all the people with this specific, privileged entitlement, whatever it might be. That's all just reporting. And I think that accessibility is going to make it easier to do things with the data that we've been sitting on. So I think AI is extremely impactful on that side, and that's what's coming first. And then you will start to see behind the scenes, and there's companies already working on it, right, to configure their tools. Hey, set up a connection to this application and my IDP or my IGA or my privileged access management system or whatever it may be. So I think I think it's a little bit of hype right now, because I think people are excited about the opportunities, but I think it's going to quickly turn into reality. The question will be, does the reality match the hype, and how quickly does that become truth? Because I think in 50 years, most IAM platforms, if they're even going to be IAM platforms at that point, are going to be almost self-sustaining. They're going to be a service that you buy, and this is the way it works. And AI or whatever, right, machine learning, language things take place behind the scenes, do the work. Yeah. And everyone at that point is an end user of the tool, like very few admins.
For our listeners and for practitioners, do you think that if you're not using AI in some way in your job now, that you're falling behind? Are there things that you would recommend to practitioners that you need to get good at this thing?
Yeah, I think you need to, it's like anything else, read up on it, experiment with it, play with it, understand the benefits and the potential drawbacks. I mean, there's no shortage of AI tools out there now, right? Between OpenAI and Google and, all the different models out there, Anthropic, et cetera. They're all pretty darn good. And this is the worst that it will ever be. It's only going to get better. Tomorrow's going to be better than it was today, and so on and so on. So I think understanding how you can leverage it for any number of reasons, whether it's, helping write a report or helping analyze data or, things like that, definitely you want to stay on top of it. I think where I would be concerned about is when I start to hear, well, we just have AI doing all the work and there's nobody checking it to make sure that it's good. That's the part where we're not quite there yet. And we need to have people who understand their space, whether it's authentication or authorization or governance processes, right, or whatever it may be. Somebody still has to check that to make sure that that is still correct, because AI still hallucinate. They go off the deep end sometimes. And so you need people who know their stuff to call out the AI or whatever you're using, right, to make sure that it's good. So it doesn't absolve people in the IAM world of not knowing their stuff. You still have to know your stuff.
Yeah, I commented on a blog article because the focus group put out a blog article. They're an analyst firm. And they attempted to use AI to put together an analyst paper. And I think what they found, which is what I find a lot with AI, is it does a fantastic job in terms of putting together the shell, in terms of putting together kind of a lot of words and kind of like, oh man, if you just looked at it without actually reading all the detail, you say, this is very good. But then when you get into the detail, it's like, it's not very creative. The data's old. things like that. And yeah, I mean, is that what you find as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where different models have different strengths, and they continually are improving things like that. I think I find some of the AI services are better at report generation, writing skills, basically. And others are better at analyzing the data and putting it together in a way. And others, are just better at interpreting actions. So I think there's still a long ways to go for all the different AI services, but it's exciting. I'm on record as being a fan for it. It's going to be used for things that probably shouldn't be used for, but I think in the end, it's going to be a very valuable tool for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Do you have any of the expensive subscriptions?
No, I stick with the $20 a month ones. I know that there's like $200 versions out there, which I don't think those are worth it for me. I think those are probably more for developers maybe, or people who are really taking advantage of it. And I subscribe to multiple ones. So, between Gemini and ChatGPT and some other ones, that's enough for me. So I'm probably spending, half that for a variety of services. But I think it also gives me an opportunity to look at different models and leverage the appropriate model for what it is I'm trying to do. So
sure.
Yeah. And look, those prices will come down at some point. They'll get the models themselves will become cheaper and more efficient to run. So costs will come down, which theoretically gets passed on to us as consumers. And then it becomes being, bundled as part of a service, whatever it may be.
Right.
But I think this is a real cash grab for a lot of these companies. So it's going to be very interesting to see when and how does the economic model of a subscription to an AI update or change over time. Is it just, hey, this is the new streaming platform? We all have like 8 different video services that we use. Is this now another thing where it's like, oh, this is just another subscription that we're all going to be tied to? And, it gets better theoretically over time. And maybe there's a war at some point. It's like, okay, well, is it Netflix versus, Disney Plus, or is it Anthropic versus OpenAI, right? Or whatever it may be.
Have you seen anything with Apple Intelligence lately?
I mean, I've seen their attempts at it. I'm not impressed by what they put out so far. I think they're actually late to the game on this. I would say it's not good at the moment. It's so basic compared to what you can see and do with some of the services out there, especially if you look at Android phones and what they've done with integrating like Gemini into the OS and things like that. It's just further along. I have no doubt Apple will catch up at some point and move beyond parlor tricks like Image Playground and, stupid stuff like that doesn't really matter. So I think they're behind, and I think they're doing their Apple thing. They're being cautious. They're not inventing the scenario. What they're going to be really good at is refining how it gets used and how it's integrated and things like that. So, I think we're still a couple of years from where Apple probably should be when it comes to integrating AI. But if you want a glimpse of it, fire up an Android phone and go into, Gemini and Google Assistant and that kind of changeover is happening. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. Very cool. There's your AI at the center.
All right. Let's go to Isabel from France. How can smaller companies with limited budgets still build a strong IAM program? I love this question because everybody, nobody has enough money or resources to get things done. Most of the organizations, that I've seen are, scraping by or have to justify every dollar and cent. So, Jim, how can a smaller company with a limited budget still build a strong IAM program?
Yeah, since I have to answer this first, I'm actually picking on something you said earlier about the IAM program. And if I put my program manager hat on, it's about identifying where you spend that small budget, right? So there's not one blanket that's like spend it on authentication or spend it on identity governance or privilege access. It's figuring out where are your needs and making that case, and then being able to paint the risk landscape. So having a strong IAM program manager is probably the first investment to identify where the rest of the money goes.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think really setting the stage for your program. What are your policies? What are your standards? What can you do with what you have? I work with a few different nonprofits, and typically they don't have a ton of money. And so, they can't afford, IGA tools, privilege access management tools, and, user and entity, behavior analysis, right? And ITDR and all the buzzwords. So a lot of it is trying to figure out, okay, well, what can we do with what we have? And a lot of that falls back to inventorying. I mean, it doesn't cost money, you don't have to buy a tool, I guess, to inventory things. You probably have some things that you can already do to say, okay, well, let's at least get user extracts, from different systems and know who has access to what. There's things you can do. It's going to be painful in the real world if there's an incident, or, maybe onboarding is a real pain because you have to go and log into 200 different systems and see, if that person exists there, and that's where human error comes in. You forget to do a system, whatever it may be, or onboarding, same way. It's like takes forever. It's a real challenge, and I think it starts with the program itself, people and process. The technology should be third on that list, and hopefully, as the organization grows or matures, they're investing right-sized technologies versus, and hopefully proactively before there's a problem that forces them to invest in it.
Yeah, so you so often hear, though, as you talk to companies, like, we're a Microsoft shop. And this isn't to blast Microsoft, but is that the right approach?
Well, I mean, they have a lot of capability. So, yeah, it can absolutely be the right approach. If you're already on Office 365 or Microsoft 365 and, you are a Windows shop, right, and all that stuff, there's plenty of tools that come along with Microsoft to help you manage it. Now, is it 100% coverage? Does it do it the way you wish it would do it? Probably not, right? I think that's where you see add-ons and third parties and all these other products come in to kind of help fill those voids. But this is where you decide, okay, well, how do we match up our people and process to line up with the tools that we actually have?
That's right.
Boy, it'd be really great to have CyberArk, right? Or Beyond Trust or Delinea or whatever it may be, but we can't afford it. So how do we take advantage of PIM and Entra to do some things? Right. Use the tools you've got. I think there is things you can do to match up your people and process with what you've got as best as you can.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
I know. I'm going to isolate that one as well. All right. Let's go to our last question. This is from Anders from Norway. I like this question. And Jim, I'm very curious to see what you're going to answer. This one is, what's your dream guest to have on Identity at the Center? You can pick anybody you want, living or dead. Who would you like to have on as a guest for the show?
I'm going to put somebody who I actually tried to get on for a guest when he was still with us. It's Kim Cameron. 7 Laws of Identity. I mean, this is an identity podcast, right? So if I enter Abraham Lincoln or something, it's a little like, well, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Kim would have been. Well,
this podcast doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. It would fit right in.
True. That's what I would pick.
So Kim Cameron. I'm going to go a little bit different direction. I would like to have more large company CEOs and CISOs, because they're the ones that are really controlling what is happening in the real world from an identity standpoint, budget, resourcing, and things like that. And I think if we can put our message and get into the minds of some of these folks that are controlling the budget and understand what their triggers are, that's going to be super helpful for people. So I would like to have more, executive level people explaining to us why or why not to invest in this thing called digital identity. Yeah. Whether you're a vendor, right? I'm sure there's large companies that we've tried to have on in the past that just haven't been responsive on that, and that's fine. But I would like to have really the executive viewpoint come on more, because I think if we can start to speak their language, that might help folks out there make a decision, or help them make their decisions and on how they want to present their investment asks, right, from a identity standpoint. And that doesn't have to be just technology. It could be, hey, we need another person because I'm falling behind here, or we're not delivering the service we need to, or it's not secure, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'd like to hear if they agree that identity is at the center. So if you're talking about a CISO of like a Fortune 10 company or something, we talk about identity at the center. Like, are we in our echo chamber just talking to each other and all agreeing?
I think so. I mean, how can we not be, right? This is an identity podcast. We're talking about identity things. We're not a mass market podcast where, we're the first thing, unfortunately, that people don't turn on, when they're a commute for, millions of people out there. We got a lot of listeners, and viewers, but they're in the identity space or cybersecurity, right? Adjacent, right? Things like that. So there is a lot of education and training, I think, to be done still for the public. And I have a real good friend of mine, Jay, where we're talking, the other night about MFA, and he's like, what's that? I was like, oh yeah, this is other thing, right? Now, we take MFA for granted, and there is not a lot of awareness at the general public level who are not in the space. So right. How do we educate those folks? How do we, bring them into the fold? How do we design solutions that are secure by design for them and usable? And they don't even have to think about security. Should they be thinking about security? Maybe, maybe not. Is that our job as identity people to do that? Yes, it is. So how do we smooth that over?
Bad answer, Jeff. You make that a clip.
I'm not gonna answer like that one. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and wrap up this episode with a lighter note from Sophie from New Zealand. I think this is a cool question. So, if IAM was a superhero, what would its superpower be? So this concept of identity and access management has somehow taken life and is now a superhero, or, a supervillain, let's call it. Either way, what would the superpower be for that superhero or supervillain?
So we know there are IAM superheroes. We've run into them all the time, right? A lot of identity programs would just completely fall apart if it weren't for the superheroes. A lot of times it's because companies have underinvested. So people have to kind of become superheroes and work crazy hours and things like that. So I'm going to talk about those people and what would be the special skill that would be able to take things over the top for them. And it would be if they didn't have to sleep. So the IAM superhero superpower would be sleepless woman or sleepless man. And they could stay up 24 hours a day working on IAM.
Wow, that sounds like a really crappy superpower.
I'm not saying I would want it. I'm just saying that would be the superpower that the real world IAM superheroes was probably, it would supercharge their ability.
Okay. I'm going to go with more of a super villain in this state and just confusion. The concept of confusion and being able to say, what is IAM really good at? Confusing people and befuddling them. And that could be any number of things, right? It could be for the end users. They don't really know how to do this thing. Why do I have to put a password that's 8 to 20 characters? Can't use any special characters. Can't have 2 numbers in a pattern, right? It's super confusing, right? Or maybe it's us on the identity side. It's like, oh, we have 80 new acronyms every year for all these different services. Did you mean this one or that one, right? And so I think confusion is like the superpower of IAM. And the hero opposite of that is someone who can clarify that confusion. Someone who can distill messages down, simplify them, and make them easily understood. That's the opposite side of that yin yang coin.
Yeah, like AI man. So I actually, one of the most frustrating things to me is like, you've logged into whatever application. Say you flew an airline, but it's been 15 years. And so you go in and you try to log in, and it says, sorry, go ahead and reset your account. Or it basically doesn't recognize your username, your email address. So then you go through and you try and register using that email address. So sorry, you can't reuse an email address. Oh my God.
I guess I won't fly.
Yeah. I guess I will just register as a guest.
Yeah. Or the favorite one is like, you can't, you try to reset your password and you type it in and it won't take it. And then you go, okay, well, I guess I have to reset my password because that's
sorry,
not
you can't
it,
reuse your
right. And then it's like, oh, your password can't be the same as the current password. Like, what?
Yeah. There's a meme out there for that. And it's like the guy with all the numbers flying around his head. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So there you go. That is the IAM confusion supervillain striking again. Like, what is going on here? Why doesn't this make sense? So hopefully other IAM heroes come in to save the day and clarify things. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners who sent that stuff in. We get a lot of messages. We try to respond to the ones we can. Some of the ones we save up for episodes like this. So I think we're already at like maybe 2, maybe 3 mailbags for this year, which is great. I'd much rather answer questions from people than, try to come up with something innovative every week, because this is the real world of IAM. So it's like, all right, well, we're going to have those conversations as well, but let's hear from people and what are the challenges or what do they, want our viewpoints on and stuff like that. And, our opinions can certainly change. And I'm sure if we look back on this podcast as the time capsule, as you like to say, Jim, in 10 years from now, they're like, oh, I can't believe the guys were talking about that kind of stuff. What cavemen? All right. So let's go ahead and leave it there. Let's see. Visit the show on the web, idacpodcast.com. Like and subscribe. That is super helpful for us. Share it with folks out there. Visit our YouTube channel, like and subscribe that as well. I noticed our YouTube shorts have kind of taken on a life, and maybe that's better format for YouTube. We'll always have our full episodes up there, but we try to have somewhere between 1 and 3 minute clips there that we do for each episode throughout the week. And then send us your comments, thoughts, prayers, wishes, curses, whatever. Send us that on LinkedIn. Jim and I are always happy to connect with folks out there. And so with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thank you for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.